Some men are born in the wrong century. John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming, Churchill Mad Jack to those who survived his command, stands at the convergence point where medieval valor collides with industrial slaughter. May 27, 1940. French village of Le Pinette. Morning mist conceals a Wehrmacht patrol advancing through hedgerows. Churchill crouches behind crumbling stone, drawing a 6-foot English longbow to full tension. 70 pounds of draw weight. Arrow nocked. Target, 30 yards distant. The mathematics seem absurd. Germany has conquered Poland in 36 days using combined arms doctrine that rewrites warfare overnight. Panzer divisions advance 40 miles daily, while Stuka dive bombers provide mobile artillery. The British Expeditionary Force hemorrhages casualties retreating toward Dunkirk. Officers burn classified documents in ditches. Soldiers discard rifles to run faster toward evacuation beaches. And Jack Churchill aims a weapon last used effectively in European warfare during the 17th century at a German sergeant who has never imagined such a threat exists. According to military historian John Keegan's analysis in The Face of Battle, psychological shock in combat often determines outcomes more decisively than material superiority. An enemy expecting rifles and machine guns possesses training, reflexes, and tactical responses calibrated to those specific threats. An enemy confronting medieval weaponry deployed with absolute confidence experiences cognitive disruption, the mind freezing, while attempting to process information that violates all tactical assumptions. Churchill releases. The arrow flies silent. The German sergeant drops without comprehending what killed him. First confirmed longbow combat kill in over 2 centuries. Last such kill of the entire Second World War. But this moment represents merely the visible eruption of a lifetime spent refusing the constraints that conventional minds accept as inevitable. Born December 16, 1906, in Hong Kong to British parents. Childhood spent between Ceylon and England. Educated at King William's College on the Isle of Man, then Royal Military College Sandhurst. Commissioned into the Manchester Regiment in 1926. Served in Burma. Standard military biography of a colonial officer destined for unremarkable career managing imperial territories, gradually transitioning to independence. Except Churchill found peacetime military service suffocating. The garrison routine, the paperwork, the obsessive concern with uniform regulations and parade ground precision. He craved action, adventure, experiences that tested physical and mental limits. In 1936, after 10 years of service, he resigned his commission. Most officers who quit the army settle into civilian careers, banking, law, colonial administration. Churchill became an adventurer. He worked as newspaper editor in Nairobi, appeared in films as archer and bagpipe performer, including a role in The Thief of Baghdad, competed at the World Archery Championships in Oslo, July 1939, placing 26th out of 63 competitors from 14 nations. Not champion, but skilled enough to put arrows through playing cards at 50 yards. He rode motorcycles 1,500 miles across India and Burma, once colliding with a water buffalo on a rural road. He taught himself Scottish bagpipes despite having no Scottish ancestry, beyond admiration for Highland military traditions. He studied medieval weaponry not as historical curiosity, but as functional combat tools that psychology research suggests might retain effectiveness if deployed by someone refusing to acknowledge their obsolescence. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, Churchill immediately rejoined his regiment. But he did not return as standard infantry officer. He brought his complete arsenal of anachronisms: English longbow, Scottish claymore broadsword, Highland bagpipes. His fellow officers thought him eccentric at best, delusional at worst. His commanding officers considered him liability. The War Office possessed no regulations addressing officers who carried medieval weapons into mechanized warfare. Churchill dismissed all concerns. He had studied military history extensively, not the sanitized versions taught at staff colleges, but the brutal realities documented by soldiers who fought at close quarters, where psychology mattered more than firepower. He understood that modern rifles outrange longbows at distance. He recognized that Mauser rifles fired 15 rounds per minute versus perhaps 10 arrows from even expert archers. But he also understood something that tacticians in London had forgotten during their obsession with technological solutions. In ambush situations, in close combat, in the terror of hand-to-hand fighting, The weapon that kills silently before enemies know they're targeted provides advantage no amount of modern technology can replicate. A rifle shot announces position, alerts enemies, triggers trained responses. An arrow kills before sound reaches the target. The victim drops without warning. Surviving enemies scan for muzzle flashes, listen for gunfire, prepare for threats they've been trained to counter. Instead, they find nothing. The next arrow kills a second man, then a third. Fear spreads exponentially, an invisible enemy employing weapons from nightmare, from history, from psychological spaces where training provides no comfort. Churchill weaponizes cognitive dissonance. The retreat to Dunkirk between May 26 and June 4, 1940, evacuates 338,226 Allied personnel from beaches under constant Luftwaffe attack. Most soldiers abandon equipment, vehicles, weapons, dignity. They return home defeated, exhausted, expecting German invasion within weeks. Churchill returns with his bow, sword, and bagpipes. He has killed enemy soldiers using weapons museum curators would preserve behind glass, and he has barely started. Within weeks of returning from France, Churchill volunteers for a new unit being secretly formed, the Commandos. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, no relation, demands creation of elite forces capable of striking Nazi-occupied territories through raids that demonstrate Britain continues fighting despite catastrophic defeats. The missions promise extreme danger. Training will exceed anything British Army has attempted. Casualty rates are projected to approach 100% over sustained operations. Churchill requests permission to bring his medieval arsenal on operations. The Commandos approve immediately. They recognize that conventional thinking produced conventional defeats. Unconventional warfare demands unconventional warriors. Mad Jack fits their requirements perfectly. By December 1941, he will lead men onto frozen Norwegian beach at dawn, bagpipes screaming across Arctic wind, broadsword raised overhead, proving that sometimes the oldest forms of violence remain the most effective. But first he must transform from individual eccentric into leader, whose psychological warfare methods inspire entire commando doctrine. The journey requires understanding that war is fundamentally about breaking enemy will, not merely destroying enemy bodies. Churchill comprehends this instinctively. The Commandos will learn it through his example. Research by psychiatrist Jonathan Shea in Achilles in Vietnam reveals that elite warriors throughout history share specific psychological characteristics: comfort with violence, ability to maintain composure under extreme stress, capacity to make instantaneous tactical decisions, and what Shea terms berserker rage, controlled aggression that overwhelms opponents through sheer intensity. Churchill possesses all these traits. His archery background teaches patience, precision, breath control. His military training provides tactical framework. His motorcycle adventures develop risk tolerance and physical courage. His personality combines showmanship with absolute commitment to whatever role he chooses to perform. When he plays bagpipes while charging machine gun nests, he is not seeking attention. He is deploying psychological weapon designed to disrupt enemy decision-making during critical seconds when disruption means survival for his men and death for opponents. The training at Achnacarry Castle in Scotland transforms volunteers into commandos through methods that would horrify modern military ethicists. 30-mile forced marches carrying full equipment, amphibious landings in freezing water, live ammunition fired over trainees' heads during exercises. Soldiers who cannot maintain pace are sent back to original units in disgrace. Churchill excels at everything. He is 34 years old, ancient by commando standards, but stronger and more determined than men 10 years younger. He marches longer, shoots straighter, fights harder, and he brings unique skills no other commando possesses. 200-yard archery accuracy, bagpipe performance while advancing under fire, broadsword technique refined through years of medieval combat study. The other commandos initially consider him showman or lunatic. As training progresses, they begin understanding his logic. Churchill is not carrying ancient weapons because he believes them superior to modern firearms. He carries them because war transcends mere killing. War is psychology, fear, will. A German soldier facing rifle knows what to expect. He's trained against rifles, understands the threat, possesses tactical responses. A German soldier facing screaming madman with sword and bagpipes has no training for that situation. His mind freezes for critical second while processing the impossibility. In combat, a second of hesitation means death. By autumn 1941, Churchill has been promoted to second in command of No. 3 Commando. The unit has conducted minor raids along Norwegian coast, but nothing strategically significant. Then in November, orders arrive from Combined Operations Headquarters, No. 3. Commando will lead major assault on German garrison at Vågsøy, small island on Norwegian coast, controlling access to fjords used for transporting Swedish iron ore. Operation Archery. Target: 150 German soldiers, 4 coastal artillery guns, anti-aircraft batteries, fish oil factories producing glycerin for explosives. The plan demands dawn assault on December 27, 1941. Royal Navy cruisers will bombard shore positions. RAF bombers provide air cover. Then commandos land on multiple beaches simultaneously, overwhelming defenders before coherent defense organizes. Churchill studies intelligence reports obsessively. The garrison is well-trained, well-equipped, prepared. He requests permission to lead first wave onto Mole Island, small fortified position guarding approach to Vågsøy. Permission granted. He requests permission to carry sword and play bagpipes during assault. Permission granted, though several senior officers question his sanity in official reports. Christmas Day 1941, the commandos load onto transport ships and sail north through Arctic darkness. Temperature drops below freezing. Ice forms on deck railings. Men huddle in quarters, checking weapons, writing letters home, trying not to think about what approaches. Churchill spends the voyage studying maps and rehearsing signals with his men. He has 105 commandos under direct command. Their objective: neutralize German shore battery on Mole Island within 10 minutes of landing. Failure means German artillery destroys landing craft. Hundreds of British soldiers die in freezing water. At 0845 hours, December 27th, transport ships reach launch position 12 miles off Norwegian coast. Landing craft lower into black water. Commandos climb down cargo nets in full combat gear. Churchill takes position in bow of lead craft, bagpipes in hand, sword at belt. In 90 minutes, he will either be dead or legendary. The landing craft approaches through smoke curtain laid by RAF bombers. HMS Kenya's 6-inch guns thunder across the fjord. Explosions illuminate Norwegian coast. Churchill stands in bow, fully exposed to enemy fire. Other commandos crouch behind steel gunnels. Their commander remains standing, bagpipes inflated and ready. Shore is 200 yards distant, then 150, then 100. At 0848 hours, the ramp drops onto rocky beach. Before any of his men can move, Churchill steps forward into freezing surf and begins playing March of the Cameron Men. The sound cuts through explosions and gunfire like blade through cloth. Most Scottish sound in the world, echoing from beach in Nazi-occupied Norway. Germans in shore battery hear it and cannot believe their ears. They've trained to fight British soldiers with rifles and grenades. They have not trained to fight madman playing music while walking calmly toward their guns. Churchill finishes the tune, sets down bagpipes, pulls grenade from belt, hurls it at nearest German position. Then he draws his broadsword and charges up the beach, screaming for his men to follow. The assault takes less than 10 minutes. 4 coastal artillery guns destroyed, anti-aircraft battery captured, German commander taken prisoner with 15 men. Churchill is everywhere during the fight, appearing at front of every attack, sword in hand, directing men with shouts and gestures. One German attempts to disarm Commando Peter Young. Young kills him with single shot. Another German, badly wounded and screaming, receives mercy killing. War at close quarters is brutal and fast. By 0900 hours, Mole Island is secure. But the main assault force attacking Vågsøy town is meeting heavy resistance. Street fighting has broken out, casualties mounting. Churchill commandeers landing craft across to Vågsøy. He finds chaos, German snipers firing from windows, machine gun nests covering streets, British commandos pinned down. He personally leads flanking attack down side street, sword drawn, moving cover to cover. Germans fall back, unable to hold against attackers from multiple directions. Battle for Vågsøy lasts until mid-afternoon. Commandos clear town building by building. They destroy fish oil factories with demolition charges. They capture German documents and code books. They take over 100 prisoners. But victory costs 17 British commandos killed, 53 wounded. Churchill emerges without scratch. His sword has blood on it, his bagpipes undamaged, his reputation made. The raid proves small, highly trained forces can strike deep into enemy territory and inflict serious damage. It proves aggressive tactics and psychological warfare can overcome fortified positions. And it proves Mad Jack Churchill's medieval methods are not madness. They are supremely effective. German high command responds furiously. Adolf Hitler personally orders coastal defense strengthening throughout Norway. 30,000 additional troops diverted to garrison duty troops that could be fighting in Russia or North Africa. A single raid by 300 commandos has tied down an entire army. Word spreads through British military about the officer who plays bagpipes into battle, the madman with the broadsword. Newspapers run stories. Commanders request him for operations. War Office stops questioning his unusual equipment choices. By summer 1943, Churchill commands No. 2 Commando. His next mission will take him to Sicily's beaches, Italy's mountains, and the most audacious prisoner capture of the entire war. 42 Germans are about to learn that surrendering to man with sword is preferable to dying on his blade. Fear is mathematics, calculate the variables correctly, and human behavior becomes predictable. July 9, 1943. Operation Husky, Allied invasion of Sicily. 160,000 troops land on southern coast within first 3 days. Largest amphibious assault in history to that point. Objective: knock Italy out of the war. Open second front against Nazi Germany. No. 2 Commando lands at Catania under Lieutenant Colonel Jack Churchill's command. He comes ashore carrying complete medieval arsenal. Scottish broadsword at waist, longbow and arrows across back, bagpipes underarm. His men no longer question his equipment. They've seen WWII. They trust completely. Sicily fighting is savage. Germans have reinforced Italian garrison with elite Fallschirmjäger parachute troops and panzer divisions. Every village becomes fortress. Every road becomes ambush site. Allies advance slowly, bleeding at every step. Churchill leads commandos through mountainous terrain, bypassing strong points, striking supply lines, gathering intelligence on German positions. According to military psychologist Dave Grossman's research in On Combat, elite military units develop what he terms combat bonding, intense psychological connection between warriors who've survived repeated life-threatening situations together. This bonding creates trust that transcends rational calculation, allowing units to function with minimal communication during chaos. No. 2 Commando has achieved this state under Churchill's leadership. His men follow him into situations conventional doctrine declares suicidal because experience proves he brings them out alive. His medieval weapons no longer seem eccentric. They've become tactical tools whose psychological effects his commandos have witnessed destroying enemy morale. By September, Sicily has fallen. Allies prepare to invade mainland Italy. Plan calls for landings at Salerno, south of Naples. Intelligence suggests Germans expect attack further north near Rome. Salerno beaches will be lightly defended. Invasion straightforward. Intelligence is catastrophically wrong. September 9, 1943. No. 2 Commando lands at Salerno into fierce resistance. Germans anticipated invasion and reinforced area with panzers and artillery. Beachhead comes under heavy fire within hours. American and British troops pinned down. Entire operation threatens collapse. Churchill's commandos are assigned to defend critical road and rail junction at Vietri sul Mare, overlooking western half of Salerno Bay. If Germans capture Vietri, they can pour artillery fire onto Allied beaches. Landing force will be destroyed. For 5 consecutive days, Churchill and his men hold Vietri against repeated German counterattacks. They fight from buildings, ditches, rubble. They repel infantry assaults and tank probes. They call naval gunfire on German positions. They refuse to yield even when ammunition runs low and casualties mount. Night of September 14th, Churchill receives new orders. German forces occupy hills above Molina town, controlling strategic paths to Salerno beachhead. Observation post on those hills directs artillery fire onto Allied positions. The observation post must be eliminated. Churchill studies terrain. Frontal assault uphill would be suicidal. Germans have machine guns covering every approach, mortars zeroed on obvious routes. Any large force detected and destroyed before reaching objective. He decides on different approach. He will take single corporal and infiltrate German positions at night. 2 men can move silently where 200 cannot. 2 men can capture what 200 cannot take by force. This decision exemplifies what military strategist John Boyd termed operating inside the enemy's OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. By choosing action enemy doesn't anticipate, Churchill prevents German commanders from orienting to threat until too late to respond effectively. Churchill and the corporal leave British lines after midnight. They move through darkness using terrain for cover, crawling through drainage ditches, along stone walls. Night is black. Germans don't expect attack from two men armed with sword and revolver. They reach first German position just before dawn. Churchill spots cigarette glow in darkness. German soldiers manning mortar position. Relaxed, not expecting trouble, Churchill draws broadsword and approaches silently. He appears from darkness like ghost from another century. Germans surrender immediately. Never seen anything like this officer with medieval weapon and calm demeanor. Churchill uses his revolver lanyard as rope to lead first prisoner to next position. Repeats the process, each time approaching silently, revealing himself suddenly, demanding surrender. Each time Germans comply, too shocked to resist. By dawn, Churchill and his corporal have captured 42 German soldiers, an entire mortar squad. They march prisoners back to British lines. Wounded Germans placed on carts, pushed by fellow prisoners. Churchill later describes the scene as image from Napoleonic Wars. He receives Distinguished Service Order for action at Malina. Citation praises courage, initiative, leadership. Doesn't mention he accomplished entire capture with sword. Some things too unusual even for official records. Salerno beachhead secured by September 20th. Allies begin long advance up Italian peninsula toward Rome. Churchill and commandos continue operating ahead of main force, raiding German positions, capturing prisoners, disrupting communications. His reputation spreads beyond British military. German soldiers tell stories about British officer with sword and bagpipes. They call him madman, berserker, throwback to earlier warfare age. Some refuse to believe he's real. Others hope they'll never encounter him. Research by historian Stephen Ambrose reveals that Wehrmacht troops developed elaborate mythology around certain Allied soldiers whose actions seemed to defy rational military behavior. Churchill became central figure in these myths: officer who couldn't be killed, who appeared from nowhere wielding weapons from medieval era, who inspired terror disproportionate to actual threat he posed as individual. This psychological effect extends Churchill's impact far beyond his personal kill count. German units deploy additional security, maintain higher alert levels, to divert resources to guard against possible commando raids, all because one man with sword has demonstrated that supposedly obsolete tactics can still devastate modern forces. By spring 1944, Italian campaign has become grinding stalemate. Germans hold high ground along Gustav Line. Allies need to open new fronts, stretching German resources thin. Churchill receives orders transferring No. 2 Commando to Yugoslavia to support partisan fighters against German occupation forces. Mission will be dangerous, terrain brutal, and Germans will be waiting for madman with sword. Every warrior eventually discovers the boundary where confidence becomes hubris. Spring 1944. Yugoslavia has become one of war's most brutal theaters. German occupation forces control cities and major roads, but communist partisans under Josip Broz Tito dominate mountains and forests. Fighting is savage, prisoners rarely taken, entire villages destroyed in reprisal, over 500,000 German troops deployed and still losing ground. British government decides to support Tito's partisans with weapons, supplies, and military advisors. Commandos will provide direct combat support for partisan operations. Churchill and No. 2 Commando transfer to Adriatic island of Vis in April 1944. From there, they'll launch raids against German positions along Dalmatian coast. Churchill studies terrain, learns partisan tactics, plans operations against German supply lines. Partisans are impressed by his aggression, his willingness to fight alongside them. First raids succeed. Churchill leads attacks on German outposts, destroying equipment, capturing prisoners. He moves through mountains with sword and bagpipes, inspiring partisans with his fearlessness. Germans respond by reinforcing garrisons, increasing patrols. They know something has changed. Raids are more coordinated, more aggressive, more effective. May 1944. Churchill receives orders to capture German-held island of Brach. Island controls shipping lanes along Dalmatian coast. German garrison of several hundred soldiers holds fortified positions overlooking beaches. Churchill assembles his force. 43 commandos from Number 43 Commando, a troop from Number 40 Commando, approximately 1,500 Yugoslav partisans, mixed force with mixed capabilities, British commandos, highly trained professionals, partisans brave but poorly equipped, loosely disciplined. Landing on Brach is unopposed. Germans pulled back from beaches to prepare defensive positions in hills. Churchill lands with his men on night of May 2nd, 1944. Partisans are supposed to advance immediately toward German positions. Instead, they hesitate. Partisan commanders see strength of German fortifications and decide to wait until morning. Churchill is furious. Delay gives Germans time to reinforce, prepare, call for support, but he cannot force partisans to attack. He must wait through long night, knowing surprise has been lost. Assault begins following morning. Number 43 Commando launches flanking attack, while Churchill leads elements from Number 40 in direct assault. Partisans remain at landing area, providing no support. Churchill and his commandos are alone. Germans are ready. Machine gun fire sweeps approaches. Mortar rounds explode among advancing commandos. Churchill pushes forward anyway, bagpipes playing, sword at side, urging men up slope. Attack stalls, men falling, ammunition running low. German mortar team zeroes on Churchill's position. They fire salvo of rounds directly into group of commandos gathered around their commander. Explosions kill or wound every man except Churchill. He survives only because he's standing slightly apart, playing bagpipes to encourage attack. Churchill finds himself alone on hillside in enemy territory. His men dead or dying around him, Germans advancing toward his position, ammunition exhausted, escape impossible. He does what any officer of his character would do, sits down on rock, picks up bagpipes, begins playing Will Ye No Come Back Again, Scottish Lament, Song of Farewell, final act of defiance against enemy that has finally caught him. Germans approach cautiously, cannot believe what they're seeing. British officer, surrounded by bodies of his men, playing music while they point rifles at him. They don't shoot. Too confused, too curious, perhaps too respectful of man facing death with such composure. German grenade explodes near Churchill, knocking him unconscious. When he wakes, he's prisoner. Imprisonment is merely war conducted through different means. Germans transport Churchill to Berlin for interrogation. They're convinced anyone named Churchill must be related to British Prime Minister. They fly him to capital under heavy guard, hoping to extract valuable intelligence about Allied plans. They're disappointed. Jack Churchill has no connection to Winston Churchill, not privy to strategic secrets, simply officer who likes swords and bagpipes. Germans send him to Sachsenhausen concentration camp north of Berlin, special compound for prominent prisoners, including politicians, resistance leaders, suspected relatives of important figures. Churchill is placed among men who plotted against Hitler, men who defied Nazi regime, men expecting execution at any moment. For most prisoners, Sachsenhausen is the end. For Jack Churchill, it's merely inconvenience. Within 4 months, he'll escape. Within 8 months, he'll be fighting again. Germans have captured Madman with sword, but they haven't broken him. Sachsenhausen isn't designed for men like Churchill. Camp holds political prisoners, resistance fighters, enemies of Nazi state. Most inmates spend days in forced labor, slowly starving under brutal conditions. Many never leave alive. SS guards expect obedience, despair, eventual death. Churchill gives them none of these things. He's placed in special compound called Sonderlager A, reserved for prominent prisoners who might have value as hostages or bargaining chips. Fellow inmates include diplomats, politicians, military officers, suspected relatives of Allied leaders. Among them, 3 Royal Air Force officers who participated in Great Escape from Stalag Luft III in March 1944. 50 of their comrades were executed by Gestapo after that escape. Churchill immediately begins planning his own escape, studies camp layout, guard rotations, fence lines, watchtower positions, identifies weaknesses in perimeter, recruits allies among fellow prisoners. Within weeks of arrival, he has a plan. Prisoners in Sonderlager A have access to small garden area near perimeter fence. Churchill and conspirators begin digging tunnel from drainage ditch in garden. They work at night, concealing excavated dirt under compost piles. Use spoons, metal pieces, bare hands to claw through earth. Tunnel extends 110 meters, passing under fence, emerging in wooded area beyond camp perimeter. September 23, 1944. Churchill and 4 other British officers crawl through tunnel to freedom. They emerge into darkness beyond Sachsenhausen and scatter into German countryside. Churchill pairs with squadron leader Bertram James, one of Great Escape survivors. Their plan? Walk north to Baltic coast approximately 200 kilometers away and find boat to neutral Sweden. For 2 weeks, Churchill and James move through Nazi Germany on foot, travel at night, hide during day, steal vegetables from fields, drink from streams, avoid roads, towns, anywhere Germans might spot 2 ragged men who don't speak the language. Weather turns cold, clothes inadequate, no maps, no compass, no supplies beyond what they can steal. They make it to within few kilometers of Baltic coast before luck runs out. German patrol spots them near Rostock and demands identification. Churchill and James have none. They're arrested, interrogated, identified as escaped prisoners. Germans return them to captivity, not to Sachsenhausen, but to camp in Austria, deep in Alps, far from Allied lines. War is clearly turning against Germany by late 1944. Soviets advancing from east, Allies pushing through France toward Rhine. But for prisoner in Austrian mountain camp, liberation seems impossibly distant. Churchill spends winter 1944-45 as prisoner, watching Germany collapse around him. Allied bombers fly overhead daily. News filters in about Soviet advances, fall of Berlin, Hitler's increasingly desperate orders. Guards become nervous, uncertain, aware they might soon face justice for their crimes. Late April 1945. Churchill and approximately 140 other prominent prisoners transferred from Austria to Tyrol region of Italy. SS plans to use them as hostages, bargaining chips in negotiations with advancing allies. Prisoners march through mountains under heavy guard, not knowing if they'll be released or executed. End comes unexpectedly. Delegation of prisoners approaches senior Wehrmacht officers, expressing fear of murder by SS. Officers listen. German army unit commanded by Captain Wichert von Alvensleben moves in to protect prisoners. Wehrmacht soldiers outnumber SS guards. After tense standoff, SS withdraws. Prisoners abandoned in small Italian village, free but stranded in enemy territory. Most liberated prisoners wait for Allied forces to arrive. Jack Churchill doesn't wait. He's been prisoner for nearly a year, escaped once, been recaptured, survived. He's not going to sit in village while there's still war to fight. Churchill begins walking south toward Allied lines, covers 150 kilometers on foot through Italian Alps, crossing mountain passes, avoiding German stragglers. Ankle injured. No food, no weapons, no identification. He walks anyway. After 8 days, reaches Verona and encounters American Armored Reconnaissance Unit. Americans don't know what to make of ragged British officer who appears out of mountains claiming to be Commando Lieutenant Colonel. Churchill has no documents, no uniform insignia, nothing to prove identity. He convinces them through sheer force of personality, authority and voice, stories of swords and bagpipes, and German prisoners captured at knife point. Americans send him back to Britain through military channels. Churchill arrives home May 1945, just as war in Europe ends. Germany has surrendered, concentration camps being liberated, fighting in Europe over. But war isn't over. Japan still fighting in Pacific. Thousands of British soldiers still dying in Burma, Malaya, islands of Southeast Asia. Churchill immediately requests transfer to Far East, wants to fight Japanese, wants to carry sword into one more battle, play bagpipes on one more beach, prove old ways of war still have meaning in modern age. War Office approves his request. By summer 1945, Jack Churchill is on ship heading east toward Burma, toward Japan, toward what he hopes will be final chapter of his war. He has no way of knowing 2 atomic bombs are about to change everything. Some warriors are defined not by the wars they fought, but by the peace they cannot accept. August 6, 1945. Churchill is somewhere over India when atomic bomb falls on Hiroshima. Single American B-29 drops weapon, killing 80,000 people instantly. 3 days later, second bomb destroys Nagasaki. August 15th, Japan announces surrender. Second World War is over. Churchill receives news with bitter disappointment. He spent months preparing for invasion of Japan, studied Japanese tactics, fortifications, fighting spirit, planned to lead commandos onto Japanese beaches with sword and bagpipes, just as he'd done in Norway, Sicily, Yugoslavia. Now there will be no invasion, no final battle, No chance to test himself against one more enemy. His reaction becomes legendary among those who serve with him. He reportedly complains that without American atomic bombs, war could have continued another 10 years. It's a dark joke, but reveals something true about Churchill's character. He's a man who thrives in combat, finds meaning in chaos of war, feels most alive when death is closest. Peace is foreign country to him. British military doesn't know what to do with Jack Churchill after war ends. He's too aggressive for peacetime garrison duty, too unconventional for staff positions, too famous to quietly retire. They send him to staff college, trying to channel his energy into theoretical military studies. He hates it, finds it suffocating. He requests transfer to active service anywhere combat continues. Gets posted to Palestine in 1947 during British Mandate period. Serves as second in command of Highland Light Infantry Battalion during increasingly violent conflict between Jewish and Arab communities as British prepare to withdraw. May 14, 1948. British Mandate ends. Israel declares independence. Surrounding Arab nations immediately invade. Churchill commands evacuation of British personnel from Jerusalem under fire. His convoy comes under attack from both Jewish and Arab forces. He personally mans machine gun, providing covering fire while medical personnel and civilians evacuate. Last man to leave Jerusalem when British withdraw. After Palestine, Churchill serves in various staff positions. Gets promoted to lieutenant colonel, takes command of Land-Air Warfare School, teaches younger officers about combined arms operations. But his heart isn't in it. He's warrior without war, anachronism surviving in world moving rapidly away from values he embodies. In 1,950 seconds, he retires from military, takes up surfing on English coast, becoming one of first British surfers, rides freight trains across Australia, captains a surfboard from Isle of Wight to Bournemouth, builds model railway in his home, stays physically fit into his 60s, swimming in rivers near his home, riding motorcycles, maintaining archery skills. According to psychologist Jonathan Shea's research on combat veterans, warriors who define themselves primarily through martial identity often struggle profoundly with civilian life. Combat provides clear purpose, immediate feedback, intense camaraderie that peacetime careers rarely replicate. Veterans like Churchill, who possessed exceptional combat effectiveness but limited interest in conventional social structures, often spend post-war years searching for experiences approximating the intensity they found in warfare. Churchill's post-war adventures represent this search: surfing dangerous waters, riding freight trains, building elaborate model railways, all activities providing elements of risk, mastery, obsessive focus that combat once supplied. But they're pale substitutes. In interviews during later years, Churchill speaks candidly about missing the war. Not because he enjoyed killing, he was a professional soldier. Not sadist, but because war provided clarity, purpose, opportunities to test himself against ultimate stakes, where hesitation meant death and boldness meant survival. Modern society offers few equivalent experiences. Corporate careers, academic pursuits, even extreme sports lack the existential weight of combat, where decisions determine whether comrades live or die. Churchill's legacy extends beyond his personal exploits. His psychological warfare methods influenced British Special Forces doctrine for decades. SAS and Royal Marine Commandos study his raids as examples of how small, aggressive forces can achieve effects disproportionate to their size through tactics exploiting enemy psychological vulnerabilities. His use of medieval weapons demonstrates broader principle. In warfare, perceived threat often matters more than actual threat. Arrow that kills silently creates more fear than bullet fired from rifle, because human nervous systems are calibrated to anticipate modern threats. When confronted by threat outside expected parameters, minds freeze momentarily while attempting to process information that contradicts training. That momentary freeze, measured in fractions of a second, can determine combat outcomes. Churchill weaponized this cognitive disruption systematically throughout his military career. Modern military psychologists studying combat effectiveness have identified what they term unconventional threat response, the phenomenon where soldiers facing unexpected weapons or tactics experience delayed reaction times and degraded decision-making. Churchill's exploits provide textbook examples of this effect in action. But perhaps Churchill's deepest legacy involves demonstrating that individual courage and initiative still matter in industrial warfare. 20th century conflicts are often characterized as mass struggles, where individual soldiers become interchangeable components in vast military machines. Churchill proved individual excellence could still shape outcomes. One man with sword and bagpipes, altering tactical situations, capturing 42 prisoners single-handedly, holding critical positions against overwhelming force through sheer audacity. His life poses uncomfortable questions for modern military establishments. If one eccentric officer using medieval weapons and psychological warfare achieved results comparable to entire conventional units, what does that suggest about institutional assumptions regarding proper military conduct? If innovation and initiative matter more than adherence to doctrine, why do militaries invest so heavily in standardization and conformity? These questions remain relevant. Modern special forces emphasize individual initiative, unconventional tactics, psychological operations, all principles Churchill embodied decades before they became formal doctrine. March 8, 1996. Jack Churchill dies in Surrey, England, age 89. Newspapers run obituaries celebrating Mad Jack, the officer who carried sword and bagpipes into World War II, the last man to score confirmed bow kill in warfare, the commando who captured dozens of Germans using medieval weapons. Stories emphasize his eccentricity, his courage, his improbable survival through situations that killed thousands of more conventionally equipped soldiers. But obituaries miss deeper truth. Churchill wasn't eccentric. He was a supremely practical warrior who understood that warfare is fundamentally about breaking enemy will, not merely destroying enemy bodies. He recognized that modern technology hadn't eliminated psychological dimensions of combat. It had merely created new opportunities for those willing to exploit them. His sword wasn't affectation. It was a tool designed to create specific psychological effect. Opponents freezing while processing cognitive dissonance of facing medieval weapon in modern combat. That freeze, that moment of uncertainty, gave Churchill's commandos tactical advantage, measurable in lives saved and objectives achieved. His bagpipes weren't showmanship. They were audio weapon creating terror in enemies who expected gunfire and explosions, but instead heard haunting Scottish melodies announcing attack from opponent, who viewed battle as performance art rather than grimly efficient. Killing. His longbow wasn't nostalgia. It was silent killing instrument, allowing targeted elimination of threats before those threats realized they were targeted. Every weapon in Churchill's arsenal served specific tactical purpose, rooted in understanding that combat is psychological contest, where unconventional approaches often defeat superior material force. The British military establishment never fully understood this. They tolerated Churchill because he produced results, but they never systematized his methods into doctrine accessible to conventional forces. His techniques remained individual virtuoso performances rather than replicable tactical frameworks. Perhaps that's inevitable. Churchill's effectiveness depended partly on his unique personality, absolute confidence, physical courage, showmanship, willingness to commit completely to roles most people would consider insane. These traits can't be taught at staff colleges or systematized in field manuals. But the principles underlying his tactics remain valid. Psychological warfare works. Unconventional approaches exploit enemy assumptions. Individual excellence can shape outcomes, even in industrial conflicts. Modern special forces have absorbed these lessons. Navy SEALs, SAS, Spetsnaz, all emphasize psychological operations, unconventional tactics, individual initiative. They study historical examples, including Churchill's exploits, but they use modern weapons. No one carries swords into combat anymore. The sword died with Mad Jack. Or did it? In 2003, during Iraq invasion, U.S. Army Colonel Nathan Sassaman led mechanized infantry battalion into Balad. His unit faced ambush. Sassaman grabbed megaphone and played DC's Hell's Bells at maximum volume while directing his tanks to surround insurgent positions. Insurgents, confused by psychological attack, surrendered rather than fight. In 2011, Norwegian Army Lieutenant Skiing Patrol in Afghanistan encountered Taliban fighters. The Norwegians fixed bayonets and charged downhill on skis, screaming. Taliban fighters fled rather than face apparent madmen, attacking with World War I tactics. In 2014, Ukrainian volunteer battalion called Azov played heavy metal through loudspeakers during attacks on separatist positions. Enemy fighters reported psychological stress from unexpected audio assault. Mad Jack would recognize all these tactics. The specific implements change electric guitars, replace bagpipes, loudspeakers, replace longbows, but the underlying principle remains constant. Unconventional psychological warfare exploits enemy assumptions and creates tactical advantages. In that sense, Churchill's legacy endures, not through direct imitation of his medieval arsenal, but through continued recognition that warfare is fundamentally about human psychology. Technology provides new tools, but human nervous systems still respond predictably to unexpected threats. Fear still matters, shock still matters, audacity still matters. Jack Churchill understood this instinctively. He built an entire military career demonstrating that oldest truths about combat, courage, initiative, psychological dominance remain relevant even when delivered through weapons museums should house. He was not anachronism surviving past his time. He was warrior who understood that some principles transcend technological eras. And perhaps that understanding, more than any specific victory or daring escape, represents his true legacy. The reminder that human excellence still matters, that individual courage can still shape history, that conventional wisdom should always be questioned by those brave enough to carry swords into machine gun fights.